You are standing in a grocery store aisle, staring at 40 kinds of bread. You feel overwhelmed. You feel tired before you've even chosen anything. But the real answer for why you feel that way is far stranger than decision fatigue. It goes back 300,000 years to a species that should not have survived at all. Your ancestors were not the fastest animals on the savannah. They were not the strongest. They had no claws, no fangs, no fur thick enough to survive a cold night. By almost every measure, early humans were losing the survival game. So how did a slow, weak, hairless primate end up ruling the planet? The answer is not what you think. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham has spent decades studying this question, and his research points to something surprising. It wasn't muscle, it was fire. Cooking food changed everything. Raw meat and raw plants take enormous energy to digest. Your gut has to work overtime, and that energy has nowhere else to go. But cooked food is different. It's already broken down. Your body absorbs the calories faster with less effort. Wrangham argues that this single shift, cooking, freed up energy that had been trapped in digestion. And where did that spare energy go? Into your brain. The human brain is expensive. It burns roughly 20% of your body's total energy despite being a small fraction of your total mass. No other animal spends that kind of budget on thinking. Cooking made that budget possible. Suddenly, a slow, clawless primate had the fuel for something no predator on the savannah could match: strategy. But fuel alone doesn't explain everything. A bigger brain is useless if you're still alone against a lion. This is where things get interesting. Primatologist Sarah Blaffer Hrdy has studied something most people never think about: who actually raised human children. In most primate species, mothers do it alone. Chimpanzee mothers rarely let anyone else touch their infants, but human mothers were different. Hardy's research shows that early human children were raised cooperatively, with aunts, grandmothers, older siblings, and unrelated group members all sharing the work of keeping a child alive. This is called alloparenting, and it wasn't a nice bonus, it was survival infrastructure. Think about what that meant. A mother could forage while someone else watched her child. A child could survive even if its mother died young. The group, not the individual, became the unit that determined whether genes made it to the next generation. Humans weren't just smart. They were cooperative in a way almost no other species on Earth had ever been. Why does that matter so much? Because cooperation at that scale requires something else entirely: the ability to track relationships. Who helped you last winter? Who owes you a favor? Who can you trust with your child? This is where anthropologist Robin Dunbar enters the story. Dunbar proposed what's now known as the social brain hypothesis. His research suggests that primate brain size correlates directly with group size, because keeping track of social relationships is cognitively expensive. He calculated that humans can maintain meaningful relationships with roughly 150 people. That number is still called Dunbar's number today: 150. That's roughly the size of early hunter-gatherer bands and clan networks. Not a coincidence. Your brain didn't just get bigger to solve puzzles or throw spears. It got bigger to hold a mental map of who you could rely on. So picture it now: a species with no claws, no speed, no natural weapons. But a species that had learned to cook its food, freeing energy for a hungry brain. A species that shared the burden of raising its young, so no single failure could end a bloodline. And a species that could track loyalty and betrayal across 150 relationships, building alliances that no lion or leopard could outmuscle. That's not a weak animal, that's a coordinated network wearing skin. Every other advantage humans are famous for came after this. Tools came later. Language came later. Art, religion, agriculture, cities, all of it came after these three foundations were already in place: shared food, shared childcare, shared trust. Here's the part that should unsettle you a little. None of these advantages lived inside a single human body. They lived between people. Strength is something you carry alone. Cooperation is something that only exists when it's shared. Your ancestors didn't outrun predators. They out-cooperated them. And this is still happening inside you right now, whether you notice it or not. Every time you remember a coworker's birthday, every time you check in on a friend after a hard week, every time you trust a stranger enough to ask for directions, you are running the exact same social software that kept a hairless primate alive on an open savanna 300,000 years ago. You are not weak. You were never designed to survive alone. So the next time you feel exhausted by a decision, or overwhelmed in a crowd, or unexpectedly moved by a small act of kindness from someone you barely know, remember what that feeling actually is. It's not a flaw in your biology. It's the oldest winning strategy your species has ever had, still quietly running in the background. You are standing in a grocery store aisle, surrounded by strangers you'll never know, and somehow that crowded, exhausting, overstimulating room is still the safest place a human being has ever been.